Ok, bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Happy Hacking Videoblog. Hoje vamos fazer em inglês. So I'm here with Mirko. I was just telling people that today we're going to have this conversation in English, which is not typical on this channel. But as I suppose you do not speak Portuguese or Spanish or anything that I could understand other than English, right?
Unfortunately, no. Yeah.
By the way, which languages do you speak?
I'm very rusty in Danish and German and Norwegian, but in English, I guess I'm rusty in English as well, but mostly English at home.
Okay.
Occasionally Danish with like my friends.
Is there a reason for you to have some knowledge of these other languages?
Yeah, I lived in Denmark for 2 years. I lived there at the end of high school, and then I went back for. At one point, I thought I was going to be an urban planner, so I studied urbanism in Copenhagen, and you got a lot further in the nightlife speaking Danish than you did as a stupid American. So,
I gotta say that it must be a privilege to speak English natively, which yes, I suppose is your case.
yeah.
Because everybody in the world speaks English, at least some portion, a little bit of English, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
it must be easier
is...
than speaking Portuguese. Then just not
well, I can't say. I don't know. I didn't grow up speaking Portuguese, so I don't know. But that's privilege, right? Is you don't know that you have it until it's taken away. I think sort of the catch with that stuff. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So both of us work with typography, but that's not the topic of the conversation today. We were talking about computers, and you were showing me a computer that you bought a few months ago. Can you tell me what's special about it?
There's some special things about it, I guess, in that it's first of all, it's the Pine 64 Pinebook Pro, as they're calling it. I'm charging it right now, so I'm not doing a good job of. But it's nice in that it's like relatively cost effective compared to other. I mean, it costs about as much as like a low end Chromebook, in that it markets for about 200 USD. It is not terribly powerful. I think it has like 4 gigs of RAM, and it has like 60 gig, like a small 60 gig hard drive, and like I think it's like a 2 gigahertz like processor. It's not a very fast machine, but it's built around being completely open source. So it's a FOSS machine.
You mean the hardware design?
Mm-hmm.
So is there?
Can you get the specs on? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not like hugely involved in like the Pine 64 community. I mostly got it because I was hoping that like I could do a proof of concept with Eli Hoyer, who's much more into the sort of I guess technical specifications of the thing. What I wanted to do was work on proof of concept for a low-cost machine that could run free and open source type design software as well as graphic design software. So the goal basically is to have sort of an all-in-one graphic design machine for under 300 or whatever, like some arbitrary limit, but something much, much lower than what typically is a very costly barrier to entry for the design field. I don't know if I'm saying that succinctly or if that's clear, but that's kind of the goal.
And by free software tools for design, you mean font design?
Yeah.
FontForge?
FontForge works. The issue with it, I think, so far is that it's hard to articulate the issue or problem or whatever you want to call FontForge's like lack of adoption. And I don't have hard data on this, but I do know sort of not even anecdotally, just like from speaking with like type designers a lot and other graphic designers, most people don't use, don't have a Linux machine. They have some like extremely high powered MacBook Pro or, you know, a Mac Mini or something, and they're running glyphs or RoboFont if they are of, you know, they're basically two schools. And then there's like smaller group of people who use something like FontLab 6 or 7, or even, you know, like legacy FontLab. But FontForge never...
All of which are proprietary solutions.
All of which are proprietary solutions to this.
And only FontForge would be the free one, and maybe TrueFont also.
Yeah, and well, right. So TrueFont is even more difficult in terms of when we talk about like barriers to entry. There's a cost barrier, but then if you go the free route, TrueFont requires a lot of sort of background in programming that most people, I mean, I come from like a graphic design background, and so it's a huge barrier to entry because you don't have computer science classes as a designer necessarily. And in order to use something like TrueFont, you really do need to have some understanding of what you're doing because you have to build that software yourself. And so, yeah, the barrier to entry, I think, it's many things. One of them is the lack of software education. And one of them is FontForge, as much, and I'm not trying to diss FontForge here, but as much good work as Fred Brennan has been putting into it recently, and as much good work went into it initially, the interface is hellish compared to other type design software. And for people who are...
I gotta tell you that it's not the user interface only, but also what's under the hood, because I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've looked at the source code. It is messy. I've tried to contribute to FontForge in the past, and it was very hard because the source code is very messy. It works. I heard people say that there are some things that you can only do with FontForge, like some very advanced stuff that you can only achieve with FontForge.
Yes.
But so even though it's advanced in some corners, it is messy everywhere because I think the person who developed it was not a trained professional software developer, but much more like a person who was passionate about type design and had lots of money and time to do a hobby full time, right?
Right, and so we're stuck. I don't know if I'd call it technical debt because it's not. It would be well, I guess it becomes a question of what's the path towards, and this question seems to be something that people have. Sorry, let me finish saying what the question is. The question, I think, is what's the path forward in terms of producing an open source font editor? And if we decide that it's FontForge, which I mean, I don't know what I'm not going to speak for Fred, but when I've talked with him in the past, he said things like, you know, he'd rather be working. I mean, and there's also evidence of this too. You can go and look. QGlyph, he's working on an alternate font editor and trying, I think, to correct the things that he found as a maintainer of FontForge to be problematic. And so I've built QGlyph on my daily driver, but it's also still like very alpha stages, right? And even Fred's not building his recent font projects in QGlyph, he's doing them in FontForge. But if you're not on the level of Fred as a programmer, you're not going to be using FontForge, right? I mean, it's just, we're trying to find a way to make a better playing field for people who are using open source font editors. And that means making an open source font editor that is sort of a one-click install, and it works really, really well. And by really, really well, I mean it's more fun and better than the proprietary alternatives, right? I mean, that's always the goal of like like the value proposition for like open source software is that it will be better and it's free. That's how you win. You can be less good and free and like sort of compete maybe, or you can be better and I guess have it cost money. But the ideal is that it's like better and it is free to use.
Yeah. I got some technical problems here, but I'll fix this pretty quickly. So, and you said that you were interested in experimenting with free software for design with this computer. That's the major motivation for you to get this computer. Can you repeat the name? Maybe people do not.
Yeah, it's a Pinebook Pro.
Pinebook.
So Pine 64, as far as I understand, I gave up on turning. I mean, the sad truth is, right, like I gave up on it being like my daily computer. I still, if things improve software wise, it could become a very useful machine. There are some hardware limitations on it that I find sort of exhausting as well. But I think that machines like it, with my limited technical knowledge, I think things like it could become extremely powerful tools, not just as tools themselves, but also politically for FOSS movement. Like, it would be good if we had a machine that could dethrone, like, I would say things like Adobe and I wouldn't even, I don't have to say names. I could say subscription-based models, right? Like, which has always been the goal, right? Is to move away from subscription-based like design models. I think that that's deeply cruel to people, especially when economic precarity is just, I mean, it's a reality. Economic precarity is a reality for even people living in first world nations. It's so to then expect that we would have an open community of people developing things around the world. It's like I think that's cruel. It's deeply cruel.
Yeah.
But again, it's called a Pinebook Pro. It feels very close, but no cigar to what I'd want in a computer.
This reminds me of the hardware design for a cell phone that I think Bunny Huang was working on. Have you heard of him?
I don't know. It might be similar because there's like they have a phone as well. They have like there's a Pine phone, which they seem to have shifted most of their development over to, and that maybe sits in like the realm of like, well, what if we just have our daily computer not even being a laptop, but a pretty powerful cell phone that you plug into your terminal and keyboard. Yeah, exactly. And like, I'd be fine with that too. I don't know. I don't have available like disposable income to go and buy their phone as well and like test it with. I mean, I bet it's great.
One of the concepts that I remember, I'm not sure if it was on the Bunny Huang's project or some other project. I just remember listening to discussions about these things, about technical decisions on the hardware design of a device like a cell phone that are meant to facilitate the user protecting against surveillance.
So, this has that too. Yeah, this is like a I'm trying to remember exactly what they do, but there's like a 1-button kill switch. There's like a mic kill switch. Yeah.
That's nice.
Nice. I mean, it has all those options, but I mean, for me, it was just a thing I wanted to test out to see if I had like, at one point I had $200 to burn. And so I was like, well, I would like to see if it's possible to switch, because if it is, then I would really like to advocate for this. Like politically I'm on that, like, but I also have to make money. So it was a question of like, is it economically feasible for me to switch over to this machine with the state of the software ecosystem that I would need for doing the kind of work that I do? And the answer right now is no, but I can see how it might become possible.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Uh-huh.
But it's, you know, it's like, it's not the like, oh, yeah, I think we like get like very like excited about tech when we go like, oh yeah, like it's going to solve it, right? And you get it, like it's underwhelming. And when it's underwhelming, it's very hard to, it becomes a question of like financial motivation and like, I guess like personal motivation in terms of like a hobby. Like, do I want to spend my free time, you know, pouring into this thing, which may or may not have dividends? So, I don't know.
So one of the most interesting features that I saw in terms of protecting the user based on hardware design was that there's the necessity of running proprietary firmware to control the chip, the telephony chip, the GSM chip, and the inner workings of the GSM chip are also not well understood, and it also has full access to it typically has full access to memory, so it could be like it's connected to the network and it has full access to the memory, so it's very creepy, right? But then the design was, if I remember it correctly, they had power monitoring to try to correlate the activity that the chip is doing with the requests that the driver sent. And if things do not match the typical power consumption for the typical tasks, it could mean something wrong is going on, you know? So it could provide the user an alert, and then they had like a switch that the user could turn to cut out the power supply of the chip. So you lose phone signal, but at least you can intervene, you know, when things
on
do
this
not
level,
look right.
you know, it's like on this level, Felipe, like this becomes more political. Not that any conversation about free and open source anything should ever not be like, I'm not saying that you can like, so I'm not trying to create some false dichotomy here. I'm just trying to say that like it seems extremely convoluted to me that, I'm going to say this more simply. I feel like you've already lost the battle if you are producing convoluted steps within software and like indicators for the user that there might be something going wrong, and then it's suddenly in the realm of your own personal responsibility. And if you're worried about that sort of thing, you might be compromised in ways physically that you can't even. So it just seems like a lot of steps that would be unnecessary if people in your position owned the means of production to produce those chips in the first place, such that they didn't have that problem. And that's about as much as I can say without having any technical knowledge of the thing. I just mean that like, I don't think you have to have like a full understanding of how chips are made or how anything is made to know that like, if you don't control that production I mean, this is like old school Marxism, right? Like if you don't control the production process, there is a chance that it's compromised.
Yeah.
And it's not just, and in this case, it has to do with protection of your, you know, your, I guess, digital property or like IP. But that's just an evolution of the old model of like, you're not owning your plowshare or something, right? Like or like if I own a sewing machine, or if I don't own a sewing machine, if I'm leasing the sewing machine, or like if I'm not allowed to repair my sewing machine, then I don't fully own the means of production if I'm like a seamstress, right? And if I'm not allowed for whatever reason to buy a specific part, I mean, that's how like in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and like sort of prior to information technology, specific parts, the manufacturing of them would be patent protected or illegal for people, and it's still the case for certain things, right? I mean, the right-wing nut jobs in the United States like to point to things like you're not allowed to produce parts for guns to make them fully automatic, that sort of thing. And that's a very like tactile analogy for what we're sort of describing about having full control over your devices. But I mean, until we control chip factories, it's sort of a moot point. It's sort of a moot point, right? I mean,
and it's such a huge gap in technological knowledge. The chip factory is such a very deep gap that is very difficult to replace, right? To build an alternative production line and technology, access to all the knowledge to manufacture chips. There's any manner that would be able to replace the ones that we have, right?
I mean, the argument is that like, well, here's the politics part. As a good socialist, I would say the argument is not that we have to build alternatives. The argument is no, we just need to change the ownership. Like all of this, if you get what I'm saying, all of the supply chains are fine. It's just the way that they interact with workers that's wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing like you could make an eco-socialist argument for the idea that like the supply chain is killing the planet. I would argue that it's probably the U.S. military-industrial complex that produces the majority of. I mean, there are other concerns, like we probably should mandate different forms of consumption if we're in the position to mandate such things. Like you shouldn't be cutting down the rainforest and you shouldn't be overfishing the seas. There are different ways to distribute food, but a majority of the reason why we over consume is because we've produced extremely negligent forms of ownership, not because humans themselves are prone to overconsume. I mean, it's the same thing with like chips, right? It's like, well, if you want the chips to not be backdoored by government agencies that spy or backdoored by the corporations themselves, well, then you have to think about, well, why are they backdoored in the first place? And it's because it benefits a specific ownership model. And if you want to get rid of the need for that, you change the ownership model. And the ownership model should be for the people.
Yeah, but I think that's where they decided to make the workaround sensors and switches, because without a revolution, you wouldn't have another way of getting access to technology but still protecting yourself. So like it's like a middle ground.
Yeah, and I guess I mean I don't want to get too deep into the definitions of what is and what is not socialism, because that's ridiculously difficult. I mean, if you believe that, like, seriously though, if you believe that like Dengism is real socialism in China, and then there's a different question of, well, you still have, I mean, it's complicated because like they have like siloed capitalism, and then you wonder, I don't know. We're kind of talking about a form of this. This gets into sort of the roots of like open source philosophy. In the West, typically it has this sort of libertarian bent to it, because Western leftism is a libertarian socialist movement. And so it's all about individual freedom. And so if we're talking about producing devices that allow for the most individual freedom possible, right? Like if nobody is allowed to see your device but you, that's a very specific form of directional practical philosophy, with the direction being that it's just my device. There's no communal there's no shared interest, and I'm only sharing it's basically deciding what are the atomic part, like what's the or not. I'm not saying atomic literally or particle literally, but what are, as metaphors for our participation within a larger political or economic system, what are at what level is the particle? If it's like, should my workers collective, were that the case, all have access to the same information like on a network, and there's no individual, because this gets in also to, like, if I produce individual like personalized whatever software on my device, and it is protected, this isn't the case, but say it was, then I have no incentive to actually share it with the rest of my, say, commune, say my building, everyone in my building, we all work in the future and it's fully automated luxury communism or whatever. And I'm producing software on my own and I have no incentive to share it with anyone else, and they have absolutely no purview. I would argue that that's kind of counter-revolutionary. Like, or you could make that argument, right?
It's funny that people often relate free software to communism, and I wouldn't say it is correct, but sometimes it is also. I mean, it could be and it could not be. It could be both. It is also very, very much capitalistic.
They're not the same, and they're not used the same way.
Yeah,
their whole. I mean, I run into this a lot on people. I know we've sort of diverged from talking about the Pine Book, but it's sort of a no. But it is a tool built as part of one particular economic. I don't know. I guess like these aren't even like fully realized like. I don't know, exceptions or responses or even tactics towards like dismantling capital. I mean, like there's a big discussion on font Twitter recently about open source fonts, like being somehow people tend to misunderstand them as like now there seems to be an understanding that like, oh, they only benefit large corporations. And it's like saying that guns only benefit a specific political party. It's like, no, they're instruments of violence, and like violence is a political tactic. Like, and in this case, fonts aren't instruments of. I mean, they can be. They could be. You can use fonts as cultural violence if you, with the strategy of like refusal towards. Allowing a different like if say you're a horrible country committing cultural genocide and regular genocide against a specific group of people, and you're trying to assimilate them into like a certain, I don't know, national mythology and everything that comes with your political program, one thing you can do is you could deny them software related to their language. In this case, it would be fonts, right? So if you can't write down things in your own language, you will cease to exist as a cultural entity. So fonts can be tools of violence.
Yeah, I have just noticed that there are 4 people watching our conversation, and there are 3 comments. We might take a look at the comments, but my
Sure.
technical difficulty here is that my mouse is not working. So I may have to run and grab a different mouse. Otherwise, I cannot click to read the comments.
Hello,
Oh, can you read the comments for us?
Yeah, ha ha ha. I agree. Hello from Ukraine. Howdy.
Okay, these are the comments.
Yeah, that's.
I thought it was much deeper questions.
No. I would never dissuade or I would never cast aspersions on the massive audience of this this conversation.
Oh,
so far it's just hello, basically.
I just remember another thing we were talking before that I would like to show you. Can you show me again your keyboard?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
So,
go ahead. You're going to say something probably about that.
But show it entirely. We didn't see the colors.
Hold on.
All the colorful keys. Yeah.
I haven't really customized it that much.
You haven't?
Not particularly. It came in this sort of like beige and gray, and I liked it because it looked chunky.
The thing that reminds me, this one reminds me of an old computer called the MSX. Have you ever heard of it?
A little bit too young, I think.
Okay, yeah. So I have a book here about computer programming.
I'm looking it up. Oh, cool.
My graphical routines in assembly language for the MSX computer. So this is a book that I've been inspecting. I usually say it's a book of proprietary software.
Oh, it does.
Because it comes with just hexadecimal dumps of memory with the routines that you can use, but it does not have the corresponding source code. So it teaches you nothing. It just teaches you how to type some bytes. So it's almost like this was like a floppy disk or a cartridge. This is a low density media made of paper.
Yeah.
And it's even worse than paper tapes, because paper tapes had a drive. This does not have a drive. The driver of this media is you and your hands and your eyes typing things. So it's terrible. Anyway, this computer, I have one of them here.
We're getting, Felipe, we're getting extremely good comments. We've got, doesn't suck. Some men keep their hair and others loses it and are forced to go bald.
They're referring to...
I've got plenty of hair. I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah. You gotta get used to the style of the Brazilians in the chat.
I've been bald since I was 19, so I've been pretty used to it.
So yeah, the MSX computer. This model has these colors, this beige and dark gray. But there was another model that was sold in Brazil that I think I only have the front panel of it here. You see, this is just the front panel.
Oh, that's cool.
But it had this cartridge, two cartridge slots, and some models had a floppy drive here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this was just the front portion of the case. The case was big, like a VCR unit. Actually, this company manufactured VCRs. So in Brazil.
Yeah.
Gradient.
That's a great name.
It is exactly what it means in English. Yeah. So this company used to manufacture, I think still manufacture. No, probably nowadays. I'm not sure. Maybe not. But they had VCRs, and I think that they used the metallic case of the VCR to produce these computers and just replace the front panel, which is the thing I'm holding. So from a production standpoint, it is smart to reuse parts. Anyway, that model had a color scheme, which you got a hint here about the color schemes.
I'm looking through images of it, and I can see like the like sort of corresponding keyboards. I love the arrow keys, man. We've really gone downhill in terms of how large arrow keys should be.
Yes. And this one, if you get a picture of the the MSX by Gradiente. It's called Expert.
And they really
Expert. The name is Expert. The keyboard looks similar to the keyboard you have.
Damn, yeah, it does. Because it has the one orange accent.
Yeah.
I bet the people making this, what is this? This is a Keychron something. The Keychron K4 white backlit brown switch designed by Keychron. It's, yeah. But I'm just jumping on a trend and trying to have something clicky.
And these ones do have large arrow keys as well. Look at them.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's so weird that they kept like the top arrow right. Like that's just.
Yes. And there's no label on this one, but it's probably the other.
But for when you're doing like fast font production, like that, or like fast font drawing, when you're editing somebody else's font, like you are just using the arrow keys and like the tab key to.
I think this one does not have the label, the icon, because it was overused.
It
was supposed to be there, but
you've got a user saying, "What an injustice! I bought myself the RTX 2060 Super. What an injustice!" I think they're just repeating themselves. They said, but the RTX 360 or 3060 came out better. So I'm guessing they mean that like it's like, I think we've all experienced that. You buy something right at the end of its production cycle, and then suddenly there's something newer and better.
But what is RTX 360? Is it a model of an MSX, or is it a model of a modern video graphics card?
Because I'm not sure, because I think they said hello from Ukraine. I don't know. Was that the Ukrainian variant?
Maybe we do really have an Ukrainian person in the chat.
Maybe.
I was not aware of Ukrainian viewers on my channel because I always speak in Portuguese.
The RTX.
So, maybe people watch with subtitles?
Possibly. Oh, no, I think it's a graphics card. Yeah.
Okay.
Not an old computer. A new computer. All I know is typography, eat hot chip, and lie. So.
Yeah. Oh, and we were also talking about the Smart Start, the Smart Start handheld and the booklets.
Oh. They said yes. The RTX 2060 Super was 500, and the RTX 3060 is 350. So, well, I guess RIP your Bitcoin mining rig, and also RIP Bitcoin. That's we didn't get into talking about value, but
we were considering other topics as well. What else?
Oh yeah, we talked about. I mean, if this is what we had been discussing earlier, we talked about Smart Start versus Speak and Spell, and then and kind of like the reintegration of like this chunkier, almost like built for children aesthetic has sort of, I think it's probably like a result of people my age coming of it, like turning 30 and like getting into like taking that and like turning it into the aesthetic of the internet recently. I don't know why we went, what was it? It went from like material design to new morphism, and now we've got glass morphism.
What do you mean by that?
I'm saying like the like sort of the shift in like recent aesthetic I don't know what you can say, like trends. Like UX designers went from thinking that they should make everything look like the Smart Start, which I would call like new morphism, which is the like Diplo block or like Lego blockification of skeuomorphism. And then pulling that forward, we now have like frosted glass nonsense. And I'm just saying these are like visual trends that like influence how everything looks, but mean very little to anyone outside of like user experience designer, whatever they're calling themselves now.
I just remembered that I had the opportunity to ask a question to an astronaut once.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Commander Chris Hadfield.
Yeah.
You know him?
Well, I'm not. I mean, we haven't talked in a long time.
No. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know who Chris Hadfield is. Yeah.
So he's a Canadian astronaut, right? And I watched on masterclass.com a course on space exploration with Chris Hadfield. And after the end of the course, they give you the opportunity to send a question to the person, and then they choose the best questions to actually have the person answer it. And then they selected my question, and I think 10 more questions from other people. But they actually recorded it as like a video call. So I had the opportunity to read aloud my question, and Chris Hadfield answered it. And my question was, I noticed that the way that spacecraft are depicted in science fiction, the borrows a lot from the iconography of computer control panels from the 60s and 70s. So even though the computers have changed their design, the way that the interiors of science fiction spaceships very often, not always, but very often,
and
they have blinking lights and
even in the a couple of things there actually. I think do you watch the Isaac Arthur Futurism channel at all? Where he talk? Sorry to the users asking questions about the video card. I have no idea if you can switch them out. Maybe. Anyway, he has described in his channel sort of questions about. Sorry. Do you want to say like what you asked him about the interior of the?
I started by mentioning that I observed that.
Right.
And then I asked him if he had any considerations in general about the design of control panels for spacecraft. And also, if nowadays the modern rockets and spaceships do have different control panels, or if they are still with lots of toggles and switches and lights.
A couple things on that. Yeah.
It took 10 minutes for him to answer. So it was very detailed, and he basically said that nowadays you still have some, like the Soyuz has lots of switches, and the space shuttle used to have hundreds of lights and switches. And since the Soyuz has been used for many decades, there's been some evolution in the design of the machine, but many things remain the same. But now you have more modern spacecraft like the SpaceX Dragon capsule.
Yeah.
And very soon there will be the Boeing Starliner. And these machines have like
on the X-37B too, if we're talking about like U.S. secret projects.
Oh yeah. But then the X-37B does not carry people, right? It's just a space plane, isn't it?
So they say.
So they say, yeah. We don't know if they have panels or switches. And,
it's big enough. It's big enough to put people inside.
It's big enough to have people. Yes.
We have a space force.
But then it stayed. It stayed there for like a couple of years.
So they say.
So they say. Yeah.
I mean, there's some. I'm trying to remember the talks I was watching. There's we've done some very nasty things to other people's telecommunications satellites. And nasty, not in like shooting them down, maybe, but like more in just backdooring other people's. I know we did this at least during Obama. We got into I mean, there's only so many ways you can get into everybody's phones in a region, right? And one of them is to like go into space and just put listeners on things. And on the so but was that the extent of his answer about the interiors, or?
He said that the modern ones have touch screens, but you still want to keep some physical buttons for some critical functions.
That's what I would. That's what. Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. Actually, was like the computers are great, but if like you need something durable in a very dangerous environment, the funny thing is that like a big switch or a big knob is much more resilient, right? Like if you have a physical computer as in like a bunch of switches that you can actually flick that are connected to like actual wiring that you can touch. In the case that one of those things goes wrong, you can fix it. But if you have like all of your air filtration is running through some software that was written at 3 a.m. and there's a bug that they didn't account for, then you're a dead astronaut.
No, but spacecraft software is not written at 3 a.m. It's
right. No, I know. I'm just saying, but I mean,
much more thoroughly tested.
Right. Well, that's the thing, though. Is like you hope so, but
so they say.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw that. So when you were mentioning like the Dragon X capsule or whatever, they're sitting there with these touch screens and they're like big stupid gloves on. And I would feel terrified if I didn't have. I mean, I don't know. There's nothing you can really do if you're leaving gravity well. You're kind of fucked if it something screws up. But I was thinking about. I think it's not Rob Stinson. He does the animation stuff for Type. There's I was thinking about one of the production designers for Alien, and also thinking about how like. You don't need terribly high tech, like you don't need touch screens to produce spacecraft going out and like mining, asteroids or something, right? Like you just want something that's durable, and
but there's also the fire hazard of all the wiring. There's the weight of each button.
Yeah, I guess once you get out of the Earth's gravity well, like if you're building things in space, it doesn't you don't. That's why I think you would like the Isaac Arthur channel. He talks a lot about the way you would construct things in space. But like, yeah, once you get out of the gravity well, you're like pretty free to make big chunky things. They don't need to be aerodynamic. They don't need like it just
exactly.
Yeah.
Just like the space station is not aerodynamic because it doesn't have to. It was built up there,
right?
By connecting modules, but still.
Yeah, you have to bring everything, but once you're up there, if you can build a factory in space, you're not, held down by anything really. You're still falling. I mean, but you're not falling towards the Earth anymore. It's all falling.
But still, if you have to come from Earth's surface to orbit, then every switch, every toggle, every lamp.
You can probably streamline that stuff. I'm not a ergonomics, or I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not an engineer putting together.
But what I mean is that the huge complexity of all of the things that you have to control is. If you convert atoms to bits, then it weighs nothing almost. It weighs the storage unit.
Sure.
But much less.
And we're really. Sorry.
All of the information can be hidden on context-aware strings. Like you can switch contexts and have much more efficient communication for controlling.
Right, until the screen breaks
then you need the abort button, and some of the more critical things still in buttons, but not everything. So that was basically his reply. But I don't remember why we started talking about this.
Oh, just the change in over from I mean, it's this question of like tension between like extremely smooth screens and having everything in context versus having things that are tactile. I think is what sort of sparks the discussion. Like,
Yeah.
do you want things that are you can really touch and are I don't know, like a stupid gamer mouse like this, which I got because it's more like gamers need precision for gaming. I need precision because I'm pushing pixels.
Yeah.
It's more comfortable for me to type long strings out than it is to on like a clicky keyboard than it is, pardon me, to like tap on a screen of glass. I similarly, when I'm doing design work and I want to like produce ideas for say like a new logo or new fonts, or if I'm trying to like draw something, a lot of people have switched to drawing on glass with like an iPad Pro and a Apple Pencil. I hate that. It's it's crappy. It all looks like Instagram to me, and I feel like you get better results and more lasting results a different form of lasting result by drawing on paper, and then going through these cycles of I don't know if I call it uplifting, but like cycling the idea into a digital format, but having a redundant conceptual framework in the form of like a paper document or I mean, like if a Carrington event happens and like all of our hard drives are wiped, but I have all my drawings with like notes written by hand, it's just a matter of building another computer and putting it into that context. And I don't know. That's like a different design question and like question of like how do we maintain a like a digital and non-digital, like what's the most efficient way of like maintaining these like hybridized techno societies essentially, right? Because you can like make computers better and better and better, but like in the event of like your more and more fragile data keeping
Yes.
completely collapsing,
Yes.
you need some form of data retention that would allow you to get back to that stage, right? And we don't have a
I would be terrified if I lost everything, because I've lost some things in the past, and that gave me a much more strict personal policy for data keeping, for
well,
backing
we
up
also
my stuff, but still it's all digital. I have like replicas. I have 3 different hard drives with everything in sync all the time, or with very minimal difference.
But would you argue it's an emerging cultural trait that doesn't have a lineage? We don't have cultural traditions around data retention.
No.
And so there's no teaching of it, right? Yeah. You didn't go to like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, you didn't go to primary school and like somebody, or I don't know, elementary or whatever, any form of like education. They're not like, oh, you should have like because they're not thinking about it. They're
not teaching rsync to kids.
No, why? Maybe some people are now, but it's a recent. I guess what I'm saying is like it's a recent
people who suffered data losses, and then incorporated that into the curriculum.
But this gets to a question. We were talking about cybernetics earlier, and it's a question of, I mean, it becomes even more important when you get to that's not supposed to be a Dali reference here, but like the persistence of memory, right? Like there were questions about this in philosophy in the middle of the 20th century, and in art, but like it becomes a very practical question when you have a hard drive in your head and it is, I don't know, maybe it's backdoored, then your brain's backdoored. I don't know. It's like but are your memories any more significant? I mean, data retention has the possibility of outliving a human being.
Yeah.
So your hard drive in your head might last longer than your actual brain matter. But we're not quite to that, but like the questions surrounding this new cultural process also apply to once we cross that line and have to do backups of our personality or specific thoughts at a certain time.
And there's the richest person on earth working on chips to do that, right?
Yeah, and we're truly fucked as a species if no, really, if Elon Musk is our like I don't know, if he's the way and the light and where things are going to go. I mean, we really will have Cyberpunk 2077 because that sucks, man. That sucks. That's terrible. Let me. I should qualify that though with like a very real. Like I'm very concerned that someone who thinks that coups for natural resources and a complete misogynist, somebody who's the son of an emerald miner in apartheid South Africa and hasn't learned anything from that experience is like someone who's fully for sort of a Nicklandian dystopia. And like, it has a sort of nihilist, if we take him at his word, a pretty nihilist philosophy about just living in a place with no real moral boundaries because he believes that he lives in a simulation. And he thinks that he can just send people to Mars and have them be indentured servants. That's horrifying. And then the idea that like, so say he does get wetware to work, right? Like or whatever he wants to call it, right? Say you have like a neural implant and you're sent to Mars with your neural implant. And now your thoughts and your actions are all property of Elon Musk Mars Corporation. And in order to like buy your freedom or whatever, or like to become a free Mars citizen, you have to suffer for this absolute like freak. That disgusts me. That should disgust everyone. Like we all deserve to go, like humanity deserves to go into the stars, but not under the yoke of some like guy with hair plugs. Speaking of the bald comment earlier, like I'd rather be me and a human being who believes in like the emancipation of like all other human beings through software and other means, but like than be some apartheid freak who wants to recreate humanity's worst aspects on another planet. If that's what happens when a species goes to another planet, if that's like the course of history, then I don't really want to be part of this species. Like, what's the point of expanding into the universe if we're just going to be producing the same forms of exploitation that we see here here on Earth?
Well, I think the point is to give us more time to keep doing whatever we do, right? The struggle will be in any place we are.
I mean, it would be ideal if we could figure that out before we started ruining somewhere else, right? Not that
or
I mean,
maybe we do not have time to.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Red Mars, then Red Faction. But I don't ever played that video game, or Doom, right? It really is just like a corporation is mining on Mars and they unleash hell. Like, and it's a metaphor, but like that is, it's funny that a game from like what 94, 92 becomes like the roadmap for not even human progress, just human expansion. And also, I don't know, do we own those other I mean, like it'd be the worst form of transplanetary colonialism is essentially what it would be. Like we're not entirely sure if Mars actually has life. NASA's extremely cautious, but both Viking landers with their test for organics, I mean, again, not an expert on this, but like from what I know, both of their tests came back positive, and there's mysterious methane clouds that could be from indigenous life on Mars. And I'm not saying that like
I don't know about methane clouds.
No, methane emissions in the South Pole
on Mars.
I believe so.
I only heard news about phosphine in Venus.
Yeah, that too. So there's also like, right. So I mean, it would apply if we went to Venus as well. If we built a cloud city there or something, like, be pretty fucked up to kill off an entire ecosystem just because we can't manage our own planet. Or, again, it goes for like Europa and Enceladus and all of these other, ice worlds. Like if there is indigenous life on those planets and we just go there and wipe it out, then,
I think but it's extremely unlikely. But there could be, yeah.
Possibly.
And some people argue that the main reason for us to be interested in going there is exactly to try to find life. Right.
Yeah, no, it'd be incredible. There's recently also that signal from Proxima Centauri. It's like another wow signal essentially. It's probably a mistake, but if it is true, then it means that we're surrounded probably by life. Be kind of incredible if everything was at the same stage of development as human beings.
I don't think so.
Probably not. Be very weird.
Extremely unlikely.
Extremely unlikely, but
yeah,
it'd be weird. Also, especially because I can't remember exactly. It's like Proxima Centauri was even closer to us in the recent past, contextually. And so
astronomically recent.
Right. Astronomically recent past, Proxima Centauri was very close to us. If there are, I've seen people talk about like, well, what if we were both seated at the same time? And wouldn't it be fucked up if we got a signal from Proxima Centauri and it was just another branch of humanity? And then with
the same problems, with the same bullshit.
They send their Starshot probe and they just pass each other in the night. Like take pictures of each other on the way. It seems unlikely, but I don't know if I agree with you on the life being terribly unlikely. It's an open question. We haven't been able to synthesize life in a lab, so. Maybe it's very hard. Maybe it's very, very easy. But if we found it on Mars and we found it on, we've proven that panspermia exists. Just the fact that like you can send a rover to Mars, you could have sent microbes with the rover. We may have done on accident, right? So it's like panspermia exists. So I don't know that like, and we've proven that. So I don't know that life being lots of places is like as crazy to me. It's more a question of like, where did it start? Yeah. What's the purpose? Like, why is it here? Why don't we see anyone else? Are we extremely unique and like doing things that are very important, or are we extremely normal? Like,
as an atheist, I believe there's no need for purpose in anything.
Okay, yeah, I guess more like a constructed, like, so yes, purpose being an artifice, right? But like, if life is some form of program, not in a simulation sense, but like if life is some form of like maybe even like anti-entropy programming, then that means that like the purpose is like to be alive. Like it's important to organize like data, right? And,
the purpose is to preserve itself.
And I sometimes wonder if that's like if DNA. I remember like in grade school being told that like the most powerful force known to man, right, is like water. And I thought to myself, well, the most like, water is like a, H2O is like a thing, but like in terms of like information retention through time, DNA is like this program that extends through space. Like, and even if your species died, right, or your biome went extinct, you could, with the fragments of that broken planet, seed other planets with
and
this
it's
like
it's much more it's a much better condition to start something new rather than just a random soup of atoms, right?
yeah, but then it's a question of, so are the aliens us and we're just an extremely old technology? And that's like science fiction speculation, but like, is DNA really just like a message from like the deep, deep past of the universe? Like, I don't know.
It's a very, very complex structure, right? And powerful the way it works.
But this, and I want to make it very clear, you know, I'm not advocating for like intelligent design, or, I mean, that is, but not a Judeo-Christian or some form of like, you know, God entity. I find it equally likely that it was just the soup, and that like the form that chemistry takes in like specific conditions is life. You know, that's there doesn't have to be anything special about it. But that origin, even if that's the origin, could still create a scenario wherein, you know, life didn't just soup up on Earth. It actually just like hit, like a comet hit, and in the frozen like center of the comet was you know, a rock where like the old bacteria from some other place and some algae were just preserved, and they were like, oh, nice conditions, and then they just flourished on a new planet.
Yeah.
And so it's a question of, it could have, I mean, we could be from far, 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 far away, and it's
instead of independent events of
but they could all happen, right? I mean, it's also, I feel like evolution is this strange what was his name, the guy who wrote the Panda's Thumb, he had a New England accent. What's his name? He was like an evolutionary biologist. Oh, and someone wrote, unsurprisingly, Star Trek: The Next Generation covered that. Yeah, of course, right? Like panspermia versus like everything just coexisting and like reproducing. And like, you wouldn't even be, if life reproduces itself in like a very similar way every single time, right? Like if DNA is just, and RNA are like just kind of a natural consequence of chemistry, then like you wouldn't even be that like different from the more, you might be eaten by the more advanced like amoeba.
Yeah.
But but if you were evolving on like separate parts of like a planet, and you know.
So I have been reading a book about the octopus's brain.
Cool.
And how their neural systems are the closest we could get to inspecting an alien, because from the evolutionary standpoint,
they're so far removed from everything else.
We branched out much earlier than the rest. So some structures are the same, but they evolved independently, and it's really impressive to have like eyes developed.
The universe is filled with tentacle monsters. I mean,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, does it cover the, what is it? Is that called like convergent evolution? There's like periods in evolutionary history where like crabs have evolved like 5 separate times independently, just as like a from
I think
life forms.
The best example of that is the eyeballs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's most, huh?
Somebody wrote, "What is this? What are we talking about?" I don't know. Is this really far from your normal content?
Random. We started talking about communism and socialism, and then 80s computers and smart start.
Now we're talking about
and design and spacecraft design and life, and it's completely random. But you know, I have no trouble in believing in the big soup of atoms randomly recombining and forming life. That's something that clicks well to me.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. It could be extremely unlikely, but still, I can see the mechanism happening.
Six City
But
asks,
then,
are you communists or socialists? We're just atomic soup.
yeah, yeah. But then there's something much more difficult to grasp than the origin of life, which is the origin of consciousness, like the subjective experience, the phenomena of
I think I'm on board with. Yeah, I think I'm on board with. Well, it goes how Gnostic I'm feeling. I probably got to go. My girlfriend is just showing up. I don't know. I don't believe in metaphysics, but I also, we might just be deluding ourselves into consciousness, or maybe it's not a delusion. Who knows? It's tough. I gotta go, man.
Elon Musk's simulation, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Doubtful. I'll see you.
Okay, I have a concern that I don't know how to stop this without a mouse cursor.
I'm gonna say.
Okay. So now it's up to me. Close this.